Yo,
Hello.
are we live? We doing this?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, exciting, man. All right. Let's see what's happening. Let's see how the chat is doing. Looks like we're live. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. And this is our first ever live stream. And excited about this one. How you feeling, Mathieu?
Yeah, pretty good. A bit stressed there. It would be alright.
You should be, man. This was your idea. It didn't come from me. So let's
Yeah.
see what we can do.
Um, yeah, a while ago I started doing some office hours on Fridays. But then we decided to kind of let's do it live and see what we can do.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, now we don't have Bruno that can, edit all our mistakes. So this is going to be raw, it's going to be natural, it's going to be transparent. And the theme for this live stream is basically Mathieu building a live extension in front of all of us. And for the ones who don't know Mathieu, maybe it's a good idea to start off with some introductions, because I think at this point, most people are familiar with my face. So Mathieu, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do at Raycast, and etc.
Yeah. So I'm a software engineer at Raycast. I work on the API and like extension and all of that. Yeah, so mostly adding features to the API, working on the developer tools around the extension, and yeah, and as well other features in Raycast that are a bit secret at the moment, but
A bit sick.
will
Oh,
be.
maybe we can show some of those, man.
We'll see.
Maybe
We'll
not.
see.
Maybe not. So Mathieu is basically a bit humble here, but he's definitely responsible for a lot of the extension API that we use that allows us to build all these powerful extensions. Um, he did a lot of the refactoring to the API that is what it is today. And probably in the team, the one who kind of knows the API the most inside out. So there's definitely no better person to be doing a live coding of building an extension. Um, and so excited about this. So let's talk a little bit about the extension that we're going to be building. When we announced this on our community Slack, which by the way, if you're not on it, you should probably join. We kind of bounced some ideas back and forth, and lots of people in the community also proposed some ideas. But a few weeks ago, some of you might have seen I tweeted about this idea I've had for Raycast for over a year now, which is what if Raycast could become a really good sort of computer migration assistant? And what I mean is, like, every time I change laptops, I always find it a pain to kind of get the computer exactly how I had it before. And the times I've tried to use the kind of built-in, you know, and the Apple built-in kind of migration assistant, I believe it's called, it never really worked for me. Same on the iPhone. So I normally start fresh. And whenever I get a new laptop, I know there's kind of a good feeling about starting fresh anyway. But I did have some dot files where I would run to install some basic applications that I had. But one thing that it never did was to reset all of my preferences. And by preferences, I mean the system preferences, like the cursor speed, right? The hot corners, you know, the typing speed on my keyboard, like all of these little settings that I would go and tweak. Um, so I tweeted about it a couple of weeks ago, I believe, like, oh, I've been thinking about this and stuff, as I do, just kind of thinking out loud. And like, I was surprised as to how many of you could relate to this feeling and kind of thought, wow, how cool would that be if Raycast could do that? So I basically proposed that to Mathieu, and Mathieu, being the legend that he is, he was like, yeah, let's do it. So the extension that we'll be building is basically around this topic, right?
Yeah, so one of the reason I agreed to do that is that I also have some dot files on GitHub that do actually store some of my macOS settings. So I kind of knew already how that could work. So I know it was possible. And yeah, I looked at the other requests from the community. For example, there was one for Revolut, if I'm not mistaken. And I looked at their API and it's just not possible to do basically anything. And yeah, so like this extension to kind of be able to store your macOS settings, being able to restore them, kind of makes sense. And it's probably a good example of something we can do live. Hopefully would be entertaining and educating at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, man. All right. So I think let's get started. Maybe you can share your screen and we get going. And then as you're doing it, you can talk through what's happening, especially for people who are not very familiar with Raycast or have never built an extension before. This is a great opportunity to see how you can do it, how you can get started, and you might even be surprised how simple it is to build a Raycast extension. And I'll probably ask you some questions, Mathieu, as you're doing it. I'm not surprised that I'm going to learn a few things here as well. And for everybody here who is following along and in the chat, feel free to ask questions. And the questions can be about anything. It can be about the extension the Mathieu is building, but it can also be about anything Raycast related. And we'll try and answer them throughout this show. Yeah, let's say the show. I like that. So yeah, man, let's start.
All right. So before actually starting to create an extension, we have to chat a bit about what we are going to use to create the extension. And so I'm going to show what I used. So that's my dot file on GitHub. And there's one folder here where I basically have a shell script that runs when I install a new Mac. And it uses this built-in CLI that's called default. And you can write some settings programmatically. That's what we're going to do. And we are going to try to display the one that you have at the moment, store them on GitHub somewhere, and then being able to read and set your new settings. Right. So to start to create an extension, you open Raycast and you write create extension. When you do that, you're asked for a few things. One is the template, which is kind of the bare bone code that will be written for you. So I'm going to start with list and detail, just because I want to show a list of all your settings that you have. I'm going to call it Mac OS settings storage, for lack of a better name. What does this do? So you can add a bit of a description, which will help if we publish the extension to the store. So I'm going to store and restore macOS settings. A category, so that's something that for people to find your extension in the store later on. So I'm just going to add the productivity one. That's my default folder with a bunch of extension inside, so I'm going to keep that one. And the way Raycast work is by having a bunch of commands in one extension. So that's the name of the first command that we are going to create. So that one is to store the settings. All right. And just like that, our first extension is created. We can open, manage it, and open it in VS Code. So that's what I'm going to do. All extensions are written in TypeScript, in JavaScript, and Raycast. So that's our first extension. So you can see like squiggly line. That's because I haven't installed the dependencies yet. So I'm going to do that right now.
Yeah. I love how you can just bootstrap the extension directly from Raycast. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty fast too. You have all your files ready.
Yeah. While it's installing, I'm just thinking, do you think you can zoom in a little bit in your editor? So it might be
Oh, yeah,
easier for
sure.
people to see. Yeah, now we're talking.
All right.
Oh, by the way, we just hit 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. So that's great. That was our goal for the year. And we did it, 14th of December. Here we go. Thanks, everyone.
All right. So I'm going to run. Oh, right. So you can run the development environment of your extension, and it will show up at the top of Raycast, and with a little green icon there saying whether your build was successful or not. If it's not, it's going to be red. But here it's successful, and that's how the first extension that was created by default is. So it's pretty simple. There's one list item. You can press enter and show some more things. So navigate between screens. And the way this looks like is that we have one list item with some actions. So the action, or what you see here, there's the primary one, which is the first one. And then you can have more that are going to show when you press Command K. At the moment, we only have one, so that's why there's only this one. And now what we're going to need is look a bit at how the default CLI work. So we are just going to run this to have the documentation for the CLI. And we can see that there's a few commands available for us. There's read, which is going to print all the domains available. So the way the settings are stored on macOS is via files called plist. There's a bunch of them. There's one which is the primary one for the really like the system settings, but there's also one for pretty much any application that you have. And if we run default read, it's going to list. So it takes a bit of time actually. Oh no, sorry. What did I do? So that printed all of the settings that we have on the computer. So that's not what we want. We just want the name of the different settings. So that's going to be read domain. No. Let me check. Oh, I think. Oh, it's this one here. So we do default. It's not read. It's just domain. Is it? Domains. And that lists all of the applications. So you can see here, this, for example, iTunes Clouds. But if we look for it, there's probably Raycast somewhere, which also has some settings. There's iTerm, for example. There's VS Code. There's a bunch of them. So what we want to do now is get this information inside Raycast and display it as a list. So to do that, I often use the utilities that we have created. So we have to install them. They are called Raycast utils. And then we can import them. So because here we want to call a CLI that's on my computer, I'm going to use exec from this. Oh, what? All right, and the way you use this React hook. So I'm not going to dive too much into how React is working. But you can use hooks inside React component, and a Raycast extension is a React component. So that's why you can use React hook inside. So the way you use the hook is you call the CLI with the arguments that you want. So here it's domain, and you get some results. So here it's data that I'm going to call domains. And you also get a flag telling you whether this command is executing or not. It takes some time, so that's what it's asynchronous. And you can pass this information directly to the list so that it shows some information at the top. So for example, here you can see that it's rebuilt the extension on the fly. And if I show the command again, you can see the loading screen here. So we haven't updated the actual content of the list yet, but that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to grab the domains, all the domains that we have, and print them so that we can know what we are dealing with. And now I rerun the command, and you can see that it's written here. So all the logs that shows that you want to print in your extension shows in your terminal. So that's pretty neat. We can see that we only have one string, and that's not really what we want. What we want is a list of string. So I'm going to manipulate the output of the CLI by passing an option called parse output, which gets some argument, mainly the std out of the CLI. And I'm going to return that check. Yeah, so args.std out, we're going to split it by comma, because we can see here that they are comma separated. We are going to trim each of them so that we don't have any spaces around. And we are going to remove the ones that are empty, just in case there are some empty ones. And now if we can see that we have a proper array here.
Nice.
So I can take this array and then start to render some list items. So Copilot is pretty nice with me, writing pretty much all the code, nearly. So for now, I'm just going to copy paste the example that we have and return it here. I need to add a key. And for the title, I'm going to pass the domain. What's happening? I'm missing.
Copilot is confusing you, I think.
Yeah. Quite often. There we go. All right. So I can remove that. We don't need to log it anymore. And so there's a hot reload happening. whenever the extension is rebuilt, Raycast see that it's rebuilt and kind of update itself. So we can see directly that we have our list items. If we search for Raycast, we have some here. If we search for iTunes, there's some, etc.
Definitely. Cool. This is it feels quite good. I feel like maybe this is a good moment to just stop a little bit, just to talk, just do a little recap on what we've done. Because the all of the patterns that you've used so far is basically how most extensions are built, right? Usually you're either fetching some data from the server, or you have some data locally, or you, like in your case, you're just getting it from the script. But generally, you have some data, you map over this data, and you render it either in a list or in a grid. So we have these are the two main components that we have to visualize these things. Um, so far, I think one thing that I just want to talk a little bit about, Matteo, maybe you can explain to people, is that even though you're writing just React, I think it's important to let people know that in the background, this is all being rendered natively, right?
Yeah, exactly. Everything you see inside Raycast is native. Um, the way an extension works is that the business logic, if you want, is written in JavaScript, but then all the UI on top of it is native. It's communicating like the the JavaScript part is run on a separate process, so it doesn't impact the performance of the native UI. So that's why like you can always type really fast. It's always really responsive. And then whenever Raycast needs some new data, it can ask the extension to provide it, and the other way around as well.
Definitely, definitely. All right, cool, man. Let's carry on. Let's go for it.
All right. Um, so now, what I kind of want to do is be able to select not to see the detail of what's stored inside a specific setting. So, for example, here I'd like to see everything that is inside this plist, and the way we do that is by. So I'm going back to my terminal, and now if we do default read, and now we put the name of a plist, for example. I hope nothing weird is going to happen. But yeah, we can see some name of settings, so it's a bit hard to read, but we can see here that the user default selected type is true. This one is false. There's often one which kind of remember the position of the window the last time you closed it. So that's a bunch of settings stored inside plist. And so now what we do is that we want to listen to whenever I'm selecting an item here. And we are going to read the plist of the selected item. So I'm doing this. We are going to use a state to remember. So it's called selected domain, for example. Set selected domain. Exactly that. So that's coming from React, sorry. And whenever we update the selection, we are going to set the selected domain. Up. And whenever the select, so if I'm logging that now, just to see what's happening, if I open the terminal again, run Raycast, you can see here that there's every time I switch here, the selection changes. That's the ID of an item, which is randomly generated at the moment. And what we want is actually the name of the domain name. So we can pass the ID here so that whenever we select an item, now we get the actual item name, which is a lot easier to deal with than a random ID. And I'm going to use an effect, use effect from React, which is going to let us run some code whenever a state change. So that's exactly what we want to do. I'm actually not going to do that, sorry. What I want to do is to execute another CLI whenever this state changes. So what we need here is read, and we need to set the selected domain. String, oh, it wants that. So that's the domain detail, for example. I'm not going to do, I might need this. And I only want to execute this query when I actually have a selected domain, because at the beginning, we have to wait for this command to finish and for us to have something to read the detail from.
Yeah, it makes sense. So you're basically creating this hook, you're putting it in place, but you're not executing it yet.
I'm only executing while once I have a selected domain. Until then, I
Yeah,
don't really need anything.
definitely. Makes sense, makes sense.
We can log what we have just to see that what we're doing is working. Let's show
Let's log
it
it.
on the, yeah. So now we see that we have exactly what we need. So we just have to display that inside a detail view.
A detail
So
view.
yeah, so there's 4 different types of view in Raycast. There's the list, there's the grid, which is, for example, the emoji. So that's a grid. There's a form, which is what we saw at the beginning when we created the extension. So that's a form.
Yeah,
And then there's the detail, which is sort of a full screen, full window view, which you can render some markdown inside.
makes
And
sense.
you can have a list and a detail on the side, with the detail being sort of linked to your list item.
Yeah. I love it how just with this handful of components, they can do basically all of the extensions that we need. There's been a few people that requested some new components over the last 6 months or so, and that's something we've been talking about internally as well. But I'm still quite impressed. Like with just 4 or 5 components, you can do so much. By the
Yeah, for
way, if
sure.
anybody has any questions in the chat about what Mathieu is doing, just feel free to ask. We can always do a little pause and answer any questions you have.
So while you were talking, I'm kind of doing something to the output of the detail. I'm going to get only the beginning of it, because some playlists might be very long, like a few thousand lines of code, and we don't really want to render any of it. Because there's just long. So I'm going to pick the first 100 lines, and that's going to be enough.
Okay.
It's just for performance reasons, so we don't have to wait too long.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, is it not? Oh, it's not. I'm sorry. And I'm also going to set the is loading prop here to this one. And now if I run this, it's not going to do anything because we have to tell the list that we need to show the detail.
Yep. How do we do that?
It's just a prop that we pass on the list. And now here it is. So it's a bit hard to read because the detail is expecting some markdown. So maybe what we are going to do, instead of just rendering the plist, the raw plist, is maybe put it inside a code block so that it's easier to see. If I do this, that should work.
That looks fancy.
Oh,
there we go. Nice.
Missing some. All right. Now much better. We can actually see some things. So it's still pretty much. It's still very hard to understand what's happening, but we can see here that I have two languages on my computer: the English French, whatever it means, and the French French. Probably, yeah.
Are you French though? You're the real deal.
Yeah, I am French, but my computer is in English, so maybe that's why.
Fair.
All right. So that looks already pretty good. Now, we probably don't want to store all of those hundreds of playlists. We kind of want to select some of them because, yeah, like, I don't know, I might not care about the Chromium settings the next time I set up my computer. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But it would be nice to let the user maybe decide what they want to store, because we all have a bunch of applications we don't really care about. And to do that, we are going to play with actions now. So instead of, because at the moment we still have one action for each list item, and it's going to this detail view, which isn't really useful. So instead, I'm going to change the title of the action to select, and it's not going to another view now, it's just doing something. What it is doing, we're going to decide soon, but for now I'm just going to log it, selected, and now if I let's show the terminal again. If I run the action, it's printing selected here. Now I'm going to use another state in addition to the one which is the last selected item. It's going to be maybe let's call it pick instead of selected, so we can differentiate between selected and picked.
Picked, yeah, makes sense.
Picked domains, it's going to be an array this time. Picked domain, an array of string, and it's starting with an empty array for now. And every time I'm selecting, I'm picking, a domain, I'm going to add it to the list of picked domain. And if I print that, we can see, I don't know why I'm closing my monitor all the time, because it's really tiny. It's just really tiny. So, right. So if I pick up, yes, now there's two. I can.
Yes.
For now, I cannot unpick it, but it's because we don't really display the one that are picked. So maybe instead of just having one section, we are going to have two sections. What is that?
Just before you do this new section, I just want to read
Yeah,
out a little question that we have here from Tonka. We all know who Tonka is inside of Raycast. And he said maybe it would be great to have a text only prop for the detail component. And I believe he asked that question when you rendering the markdown and then you're formatting as markdown. And
yeah.
so, yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so it's actually something we discussed last week, if I remember correctly. And that's something we might introduce soon. Maybe instead, so the reason why I started with content here is because the API that we are starting to discuss that's on our mind is that you would have a content prop and a mod prop, which would be either plain or maybe Markdown or maybe code editor, maybe. We'll see. But yeah, it's just giving us a bit more freedom into um, what kind of content you can pass to a detailed view.
Yeah,
But that's secret.
it's a secret. Let's not say anything.
Yeah.
And another thing also from Tonka is a video component. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, so maybe you could have another mode, which would be video, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, cool, man. All right, let's go. Part two or part
Right.
three.
All right. So we were with picked domain here. And so how can we do that? So we have the picked domain and we need the all the other basically. So non-picked domain, unpicked. Is it an English word? Non-picked.
Anything
Um,
goes, mate, I think.
yeah. So yeah, so that's we have the picked domain, and then we need the unpicked domain, other domain, non-picked. So now if I run this, so all of the domains start in the other category at the beginning, but then if I pick one, we can see that there's two sections now. One with all the picked domain. Oh, I just crashed. Oh yeah, because I selected the item twice. So that's not really possible to have the domain multiple times. The idea duplicated, so that's why it's breaking here. You can see that it's
Got it.
telling me that I selected them twice and tried to render the same item twice, which is forbidden.
Right.
So instead of picking the item when it's already selected, we are going to unpick the item. Is that a word? Yeah. And instead of adding it, we want to filter it. And I think that's it. So now I can pick one and I can unpick it, and that doesn't crash anymore. That's it.
That's very good. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Can we change
So I
the
think.
icon when it's selected and not selected?
Oh, sure. Yeah. We can use the built-in icon actually.
The-
Maybe.
Yeah. 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 So, yeah, that's another thing that you get when you're building Raycast extensions from the API. You get our icon library as well. Easy to
Check.
integrate.
Does that work? And I'm just going to remove it if it's not selected. Yeah, so we have a check here when we select it.
Nice. Let's
Uh,
see. Oh, look at that. That's
check.
cool.
I think this one looks better. So we can check actually the developer extension, the developer documentation, sorry, to see the list of all icons that we have. So it's in user interface, icon. What? Oh, there we go.
It's loading up.
Wow. All right. So the check, I'm going to use that one, which looks a bit better than just check, in my opinion, maybe.
Okay.
And for, yeah, check mark. They say it. Yeah. All right.
Nice.
So what do we want to do next? The next thing we have to do is kind of have a new, how do you say, a new action to store the domain somewhere, the settings somewhere. So we are able to select some, read what's inside, and now we have to put it somewhere so we can restore them
Yep.
after. So I'm going to add another action. So the way I do that is just adding another action component to the action panel. And I'm going to call it save settings.
Save settings. Yeah. So that's the
Yeah.
action we're going to use to actually store this somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to give it a shortcut as well. So shortcut are keys that you can press to call the action directly. So you don't have to go inside the action panel and search for it. So for example, so the first action is always enter or return, and the other can have multiple ones, so different ones. So this one, for example, shift command F to add to a favorite. So now it's
Right.
appeared here. So I'm
Nice.
going to give it one as well. So that's the syntax, if I remember correctly. And I'm going to give it command S, just because that's what you use
save.
for saving, right?
Cool.
And here, save.
All right, let's have a look at the log. And then I got a question for you.
Yeah. So I have to pick one first and then save settings. It's good.
Let's see. There
Right.
it is. Looking good. Nice, man. Good progress so far. It's looking nice.
Yeah.
Next step will be to actually push this somewhere.
Yeah.
But we got a little question here from Alex Turner. Does Raycast have a public backlog for extensions you'd like to build, but don't have the time to? Is an open source wishlist backlog a thing? So I guess what he's asking is, do we have a place where we kind of keep track of extensions that we think would be good to have, but we haven't actually got time to build it?
I don't think we do as Raycast, but there's a bunch of extension requests in the Slack community. And I actually believe one of the community member created an Airtable, if I remember correctly, with the
Really?
list of suggestions from other members. I don't
Wow.
really know.
We need an extension that integrates with that Airtable so we can close the loop.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so we don't have an official one, but I think there's a community member that created one.
Yeah. All right, Alex. So if you're not on our community Slack, then make sure to join. There's a bunch of channels there. One of them would be related to extensions, and you can always have a look there. And also, if you haven't built an extension yet and you want to, and maybe that's why you're asking, so you can get some ideas, then that's also a great place to do that, and also to get a bit of help. Mathieu, Sorin, the rest of the Raycast team are usually active on there as well.
Yeah. All right.
So one
now
question: where are you going to push all these things
Yeah.
to? Huh? I'm thinking here,
Yeah.
like you're going to store this somewhere, right? So where are you thinking of doing it?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking of using a gist, which is a service from GitHub, which makes it really easy to create a few like a gist, which is a list of files with some content inside. So I can create one here, live stream, add some content. I can add another file with another file name, and then I can create either a public gist for everybody to be able to see, or a secret one which only I can access.
Right.
So that makes it really easy to create, to store your settings. We can create a secret gist with the list of all the playlists that we want to store. And then they have an API to read that as well. So it's
Okay.
kind of convenient.
Nice. All right. I've always wanted to know how to dynamically create one, so looking forward to this part.
Yeah, so if we look at the GitHub API, there's gist here, and they have a bunch of endpoints, so you can list all your existing gists. So that's what we are going to use to find the one that we created before, but we can also create one. You can update one, you can delete one, and so on.
Right. Gotcha.
Um, right, but to be able to use this API, we have to be authenticated somehow. And the way to do that in Raycast is to use OAuth. So I'm going to use
Oh,
that's going
okay.
to get a bit technical because OAuth is never easy. But we
Wow, you're
have
challenging
actually
yourself, man. I was gonna do a
so,
much simpler extension. I'm surprised with everything you're doing.
so I'm going to cheat a bit. I'm
Okay.
actually going to use the implementation of the where is it? I'm going to use the implementation of the GitHub extension that's public. So if I go there, I search for, I think it's inside API or auth. And that's sort of what I'm going to copy paste because it's working well. And I can reuse the client ID. It doesn't really matter. There's no secret scope attached to it. And often you can kind of get away with that if somebody in the community already implemented an extension that uses the same service. You can usually reuse it. So
Yeah,
we need
makes sense.
we need node fetch here. So I'm
Cool,
going
cool.
to install that.
While you do that, let me read out a little question we have for you from Zen Mushi. Do the defaults have any sensitive data that we should be aware about when we put them on GitHub? I believe even if private, if someone has the URL, they can still access.
No, so if it's private, I don't think. I mean, I'm not sure actually, but if I look at secret here,
Yeah, let's have a look. I have the feeling if it's private, only
oh
you
no
should
no
have access to
no,
know.
it's actually visible to anyone who has the URL.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so
Wow, look at that.
so
Thanks,
I
Zen.
yeah, so I wouldn't expect any sensitive data to be in the default because
Right,
you actually have a bunch of APIs to store sensitive data on macOS, mainly the keychain. So, for
right.
example, on Raycast, we don't have any sensitive data, and I don't think macOS store any sensitive data either. Um, so, I think we are fine with using a gist, to be honest.
All right.
Um, but yeah, like for a production ready kind of extension, we might need to use maybe a specific GitHub repo that it's a private one. But
Right.
just for convenience sake, I'm going to use a gist here.
Right, right, right. Yeah, so just to clarify, if you were building this as a production extension, maybe using JS is not the best solution. And although you shouldn't really store any sensitive data, there's even a comment from Kangaroo. Swan Squirrel. Great username. That, yeah, maybe not every app will follow this, but this is just a demo to show you guys how you can quickly get an extension up and running, even something as complex as this, integrating with different services. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm also going to steal the icon from the GitHub extension.
Oh, a lot of stealing
Um,
today. Idea.
yeah, yeah.
While you steal things, let me answer this question from Forest D. Are extensions always going to be open and free? Or do you guys have plans for paid extensions in the store in the future? So this is a question that we answered in our first ever Q&A. We have a video about that on our GitHub. And at the moment, we don't really know, but we have talked internally about the idea of creating a bit of a marketplace for extensions, so authors can perhaps charge for some of the extensions they make. Um, there's no kind of promise that this is happening in the near future. I think that this is something that would make a bit more sense when Raycast is much bigger than what it is now, with a lot more users. But yeah, that's something that we're open to discussing, and another topic that we would usually bring up in our community Slack to see how the community feels about it as well.
All right. Um, so now I'm going to start adding the function, to start implementing the function that's actually going to store our settings somewhere. So I'm going to create another file just to keep things nice and tidy. I'm going to need, I think, two packages for that. One is the GitHub API. They have a package that nicely wrap all of the endpoints, so we don't have to use fetch directly. So it's, I think, if I remember correctly, it's OctoKit.
Cool,
And
cool.
I'm going to use execag as well, just to run the commands with a promise and all of that. I don't have to deal with child processes directly,
Nice.
which
And
is
all this is so you can connect to GitHub, basically, right?
yeah, connect to Git. So the OctoKit one is to connect to GitHub. So the way you use it is, I think it's something like const OctoKit, and then you pass it a token. So how we are going to get the token is with the function that we implement, that we stole previously. This one, which returns the token directly whenever Raycast do the authorization.
Hmm.
So it's and I think you also have to pass it the fetch function, just because we are in a node environment and not in a browser. Not fetch. All right, but first I'm going to export a function that we're going to call store settings or save setting maybe. And we have to pass it the list of domains that we selected. So that was an array of string. And now
Yeah.
we are going to do some stuff inside. All right. Now what do? We are going to first get the list of all our gist to try to find if we already created one, because we don't want to keep creating gists every time we save the settings. We want to kind of update the one we already have. And the
Right.
way we are going to do that is just calling the API, so OctoKit request. So that's not a post, that's a get, and that should get us um, an array of gist, and now we have to find one. Um, so we are going to give our gist a specific name so that we can find it later. So that's obviously that's not ideal um, in terms of how do you say determinability. Yeah, whatever. Like you could already have a gist called the same, but we are going to give it a name that is unlikely that going to
Okay.
conflict, just because that's easier
Can I ask you a
for.
little question we have here from Jag K?
Yeah.
It's about the Raycast API. Why why can't we use an async function to create a viewable commands?
Because a command is a React component, and React components aren't async. Um, you like an async function could only return a specific maybe element, but you wouldn't be able to use all of the hooks. You would return an element, but not a component. Um, and to have some kind of interaction with the command, you need a component and not an element. So that's a bit technical, but the way React work is that you have um, a tree of components that each returns element down the line. And if you were to only return an element, you wouldn't be able to have like it wouldn't be you wouldn't be able to interact with it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Jag, let us know if there's anything else you need clarification on. And by the way, Mathieu, just a little heads up, we've
Yeah.
gone over the 1 hour mark, which is not a problem. I think that we can keep going a little bit longer, but just so you know, um,
Yeah.
I don't know how much longer we should go, but I'll let you go as long as you're happy to.
Yeah, so maybe we can do a two-part stream because I don't think we are quite ready yet. Um, but I can continue a bit. You can just tell me whenever I should stop.
All right, maybe let's get this. Let's go through this part of getting all this pushed to gist.
Yeah,
That
let's
way,
try
we've
to
done kind of
save.
part one of like reading the settings, pushing them somewhere, and we can either do another stream where we show how to restore, or we can then publish this as a template, and
Yeah,
people can take a look. But yeah, let's continue for now.
sounds good. So before doing some kind of logic there, I'm actually going to. Uh, what's happening here? Oh. I'm actually going to just log the data that we have, just to make it step by step. So I think it was here. So instead of save here, we are going to save settings and pass it the picked domain. If we go back here, we should see all the gist that I have. Hopefully I don't have too many secrets there. So I'm going to pick that one and then save. So that's the flow of authorization inside Raycast. So it's quite
Yeah,
nice. We didn't have to do too much. So we kind of provided an icon, a name, and it's going to ask me to sign in GitHub. So I was already signed in GitHub, so that's pretty fast. And then it's successful. And now here, yeah, so we can see we have the list of all my gist. So that's working. We were able to get a token that we pass to the GitHub API and get some data back. So I'm just going to continue a bit here. So I'm going to give it a name, this one, just because. And now we need to get the data that we want to store in the gist.
Okay.
So it's going to be stored as files. And for each domain that we get, we are going to read the domain and return them. So we didn't do that as part of the view because that would be too slow. We don't want to load all of the data at the beginning. I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of the stream, I did that and it took like 30 seconds. So we only want to do that when we actually store the files, the settings.
Right.
So that's going to be a promise. Yeah, exactly that. And for each domain, I'm going to do import xdk from xdk. And I'm going to do content. So now we need right. So in the view, we were using read here to get the detail, like all the plist itself. But there's another command called export, which is going to create a non human readable content. But that's actually much better to export because we can then import it. Because the issue with the read, for example, here, sometimes in plist you have binary data, and you get this, which is not the binary data. You can see here that it's truncated.
Okay.
So it's not possible to store that and re-import it. So we are going to use the export function instead to be able to store to get the actual content as binary.
Okay.
So that's a bit of a trick that I discovered last week, because if you actually print the documentation for the default commands, CLI, you won't see it. So that's kind of a trick.
Nice little trick.
Exactly. So we need to give a name for the file, and we're going to trim the std out. So we have a list of file, and now what we need is actually an object. So we are going to create the object here. File. So it's an object keyed by file name and with the content. So that should work. To give it this record string, exactly this. So now that we have the file, what we want to check is if we had an existed gist and with an ID, then we are going to patch the existing gist. So we pass as argument the ID and the files. But if we didn't have one before, then we are going to create one. Oh. No, but maybe I need data here. Yeah. We are going to create one with the name that we are looking for. So the one that we search for. With the file, I'm going to tell it that it's a secret one. And that's pretty much it. And now if I log the gist at the end, we are going to be able to see what it's doing. So I'm setting some I'm saving them. It's not showing anything, so it's not very user friendly at the moment. But we can see somewhere. Yeah, we can see here that we got the gist. And if I open it,
Oh,
where's the
let's see.
one?
Let's see. Moment of truth.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find. Or is it this one? So we can see our um, the file that I just stored here, that I selected and stored.
Very nice.
Um, yeah, so something we can do just very quickly to make it a bit nicer is to show toast,
Yeah.
just to see. I think it's show toast.
Yeah. Just manage the user feedback.
Exactly. Raycast. So I'm going to start to show one here. Show toast. Give it a style. Saving settings. And then at the end, it's going to be toast.title. What settings saved is the title. Oh, up. And now if I store that again,
Yep.
you can see here the toast. And
Saving.
yeah,
Yeah.
succeeded. I probably need to set the style as well to be this.
Yeah.
Success.
Oh, look at that. Look at that beautiful UI. I love that.
All right.
Cool, man. Wow. I feel like we've done so much. We've gone just over an hour. Probably actually since we started, coding's been exactly 1 hour. And
Perfect.
even though we've been guiding the audience very thoroughly through what you've been doing, I'm quite surprised how much we've been able to do in 1 hour. So we've covered different components. We covered, fetching some data from somewhere, mapping over this and rendering list items and different hooks, as well as showing our icon library, managing user feedback. And we even touched on authentication, which, to be fair, I was not expecting at all. So it's really good how much you've done. And on that note, we do have one little question I want to ask you, which is from Foresty. Any reason/story why we chose React?
I believe it's because it's a nice way to describe a UI. And the underlying, so there were existing, I'd say, implementation of React that showed that it was possible to have a native UI on top of it. And yeah, like the way you describe a UI in React makes it quite interesting and powerful to implement natively as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think before we implemented the React API, that was before I was working at Raycast, and there was already a Swift API which you could use to build extensions. And but then from talking to Thomas a few years ago, I remember he was saying also that if we wanted to have an extension store with a lot of extensions and in a way that anybody could contribute regardless of the kind of Swift knowledge, then going with React would allow us to kind of amplify that even more. So I think it's way easier for people to know React than to know Swift. So it's much easier to kind of get started and get something up and running. We have a lot of people in the store that have contributed to extensions, and before then they had never even written React. So it's relatively straightforward to get up and running with it. I think that probably contributes to that decision making. However, I wasn't here, so I'm just making it up. So Thomas, if you're in the chat, feel free to correct me. Cool. So I think we can wrap this up. Mathieu, how do you feel if we wrap this up and maybe we schedule a part two where we can restore all of these settings
Yeah,
on Mac OS?
yeah. I feel like we are at a point where we can stop quite nicely.
Definitely. Congrats, man. Wow. I don't think I would have been able to do that, man. I would have been too nervous. Good stuff. So before
It
we
was
wrap, just say a couple of things. First, thanks everybody for joining. We've had around 50, between 50, 60 people watching for about an hour. It's quite impressive. That's 45 people more than what I was expecting. And so if you are not subscribed to our channel, then please consider doing so. We've been pushing videos on a weekly basis. I also want to say a quick thank you to Milena and Bruno, who are behind the scenes, making sure that your questions are being answered and all of the little camera movements are happening. So that makes things easier for us as well. So thanks, guys, for that. And thanks for tuning in for our first ever live stream. We're gonna try and do this more often. So if anybody has any ideas on topics that you want to know about, more live coding streams as well, or maybe just an office hour where we can just get a few people from Raycast together, we can just answer some general questions about Raycast. Anything goes really. So just let us know either on our community Slack or on Twitter. Cool. Cheers, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
bye.